Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Now that my two obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And some people have awared me that Athlean-X, Jeff Cavalier, has made a video, and they were like, Jason, he's talking bad about you in the video. And I actually watched the entire thing, and I actually have no clue what they were talking about. Why anyone would think he was referencing me in any way, no idea. But I went ahead and watched the video, so I thought I would discuss it. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And you know, I don't always agree with everything Jeff says, and I didn't agree with everything he said in this video, but overall, I feel like he made some solid points, and I actually think it was a pretty good video, all things considered. Now, a lot of people will say, well, maybe he was talking about you because of whatever, lack of training experience, and it's like, guys, what the hell are y'all talking about? I'm in my 40s, just like Jeff is. He might be a lot leaner and more ripped than me, but I am bigger and stronger than he is. I can probably beat him on any lift that you can come up with. So hopefully no one is thinking that that's what it comes down to. And that's not even a knock at Jeff, because Jeff obviously doesn't really train for maximum strength. He does train really for more the conditioned look and being leaner and everything. So obviously there's going to be that difference. But we're in the same age range and everything, and we both have a lot of training experience. Truth be told, it was a pretty good video, and I think what he really highlighted well was that you do need to have some flexibility, and sometimes you do have to experiment a bit, and experience does come into play, and we can't look exclusively at scientific studies, but you also have to have some common sense there, because as he knows, just like all of us know, we know that ideally, if you go just upon the research on muscle protein synthesis, like 48-hour breaks between training a muscle or a movement pattern again is most likely going to yield best results. But we need to keep in mind there are a lot of other variables at play there, and that's not necessarily true in a dynamic environment. It might be true on paper, but yeah, in a dynamic environment, it's not necessarily the case. And there are a lot of other factors that can affect that, such as recovery, a lot of different things going on. In fact, there are benefits sometimes to training the same exercise every single day, which, again, stuff I've done myself and demonstrated on camera over time. But the whole point we get to there is that he did break down that, yeah, higher frequency does seem to be beneficial, and he did talk about pairing movement patterns together and the need for, if you're going to split things up, looking more towards a movement pattern split instead of what he called basically a stupid bro split. And I agree with him there. The only people who get fantastic results on stupid bro splits are guys usually blasting a lot of drugs who are very genetically gifted. And to be quite honest, it probably doesn't matter a whole hell of a lot what they do at that point. In other words, if you're trying to get big and jacked and ripped, and you have the right genetics for it, you put enough stuff into your body, you're going to get big and jacked and ripped, even if your training is really bad. Right? Let's be realistic here. Genetics and drugs go a hell of a long way. In fact, they can go a lot further than ideal or optimal training can. I do like the fact that he really did highlight that there can be problems with the bro split in terms of, again, recovery of muscle groups, depending on how you organize it. Exercise selection, things like that, and I'll agree with that. The one thing, though, I will note is that what he kept coming back to, though, was he would talk about the different sort of splits, like the push-pull versus push-pull legs. And so what I tell people, I'm not big on push-pull leg setups. I really don't get the point because legs should be in your push and pull. I mean, that's part of it. Anytime you pull off the floor, you're involving legs. Anytime you push while standing, you're involving your legs. What do we mean? Squats and deadlifts are perfect examples. Power cleans, snatches, all that stuff. But again, coming back to squats, I mean, squat, 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 that's a push. So in theory, anytime you're pushing, you're working quads to a large extent, and anytime you're pulling, again, if it's a total body exercise, you're going to be working your hamstrings, posterior chain. So separate leg days don't really make sense in terms of that unless you're having a squat specific day. So I know he did talk about the push-pull legs, and I can understand that from a movement pattern perspective of where he's coming from. I'm just not a fan. If someone's going to split away from full body or total body training, as he called it, I think push-pull does work a little bit better, especially in terms of if you're going to do it as movement patterns. We oftentimes look at it as upper lower, but realistically, all that's doing is having a squat and deadlift day and then upper body days is really what happens with upper lower when it's done correctly. And I think it oftentimes works better done as a movement pattern as a push pull, which again something he did advocate for in there, and I agree with that. I agree with that very much. But the problem we come into with that whole push pull legs thing is that I think we can run into frequency problems unless you start doing lower body exercises on the push and pull days. Meaning, if someone's going to run a push pull legs like he talked about, I think it actually comes back to his point about sometimes less than ideal splits can be made up for with exercise selection. And so even then I would say his point holds true. So even though I'm going to be critical of push pull legs, if you follow the point that Jeff made in there, what do we have to conclude? Well, that you can even overcome the problems with that. Because the problem with push-pull legs is that your legs don't get enough training if you do it as a bodybuilder would. But what happens if on a push day you're doing a push press? What about if on the pull day you're doing a lot of deadlifting and then your leg day you're doing a lot of squatting? Okay, that's a little bit different. Your lower body's going to get adequate stimulation. But I think the problem we run into with a lot of this stuff is that they tend to just be so dramatically upper body dominant in terms of what you're doing that your legs and your leg strength and entire lower body and posterior chain just get completely neglected if you're not careful. And we get back to the point of where the bro split runs into basically your legs only really getting trained once a week. Best of luck with that. You better be on a hell of a lot of drugs to get results doing that. So I think kind of the take home that I would have to say with a lot of what he said is that a lot of the benefits, though he would throw into push-pull setups or push-pull legs, you already get inherently with full body. So the thing I would say there is that I don't know that I really see the perk there. I still think for most people, the only reason to really split away from full body is psychological and organization reasons. You just get burned out on it, which is a valid point. Number two, that your training volumes themselves get so high that you need to split it up into more than 3 days. And therefore, that's when things like some of the push-pull and push-pull legs and things come in, when people are like, well, I don't want to spend 5 hours in the gym in one session. But you've also got to question, what are you doing with your training to where you're needing 5 hours of training in a single session to get everything you need? Because we're also coming down to the point of, do you really need to spend 12 to 15 hours every week in the weight room? Unless you're a very, very, very serious athlete, it's just not worth it, because you're literally doing 2 to 3 times as many hours as you need to every week trying to glean a 1% advantage, because that's what you're doing with that. With that extra 10 hours you're putting in every week, you're hoping to get 1% more gains from that extra 10 hours, right? And so for most people, that's just not good time economy as far as that goes. But I would say overall, a lot of the perks he was talking about, well, you can do this and still get this frequency and that, but you already get that inherently in full body. The one thing I will say, though, is that he did come back and say that even with full body, you can specialize. And that's the reason I always advocate full body. I feel like you simply do not have the same problems you do with other splits. Of your margin for error is lower, because at the end of the day, he is right that your exercise selection and your volume selection really does let you tune full body to kind of do whatever you want. And that's the reason I tend to be the proponent for that. I'm not saying I've always done full body, or I even write programs that aren't for people that I put out for free, but I do tend to lean in that direction because it gives you an ideal template to work off of, because you are hitting every muscle 3 times a week. But where people mess up is that they assume that full body means you're doing the exact same thing every time you're in the gym, and that's not true. So if you kind of come back to what Jeff says, and I do like that he did kind of give the nod back to the full body of, technically, you could pick exercises to where you get a large amount of volume for one muscle that you feel needs a lot of volume one day for hypertrophy purposes. You could put that in on Friday and do a lot less volume for it on Monday and Wednesday. For example, let's say for Monday and Wednesday, you do for your back work, you do mostly deadlifts or snatches, or as he talked about, pullovers and straight arm push downs and things like that, right? Where your biceps don't get a lot of work, and maybe you need a lot of volume for biceps one day seems to be what works for you, which is, something he discussed. Then you come around to Friday, that's where you do a bunch of chin-ups and curls. because at the end of the day, you can still do smaller movements for your weak points on a full body training. Full body training doesn't mean that you squat, bench, deadlift, squat, bench, deadlift, squat, bench, deadlift Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It means that you're just making sure that your entire body, at least most of your body, gets trained together, which is kind of the whole point of pairing movement patterns. Well, you can do that continually at full body because you know the movement patterns are going to be paired together. But you can absolutely specialize more in your full body. Like if you train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you feel like you need more pressing, you can do 2 pressing exercises. You don't have to just bench press or just overhead press. If you feel that's an area you need to specialize, you can go ahead and do relatively high volumes, both benching and pressing, every single time you're in the gym. If you need more pulling, you can add an extra pulling exercise every time you're in. If you have a weak point that you feel just needs more work, whether it's, your delts from face pulls or some sort of curl or something for your biceps or whatever you happen to be doing, you can throw more of that in on a full body, and you don't have to even throw more of it in every single time you're at the gym. If you feel that you just need a larger training volume for it, you could throw it in on Monday or Friday, get that larger training volume that you feel you need to break through a plateau with a given muscle or movement pattern, and then you'll re-stimulate that muscle protein synthesis with the lower volumes of it on the other 2 days. So ultimately, my view with the full body is that the reason I still always advocate for that is that it gives you the most flexibility. That actual splits are dogmatic, and they lock you into nonsense, and they put you into the mindset of saying, I can't do X, Y, or Z. I can only do this on this day because this is my push day, right? This is my push day, so therefore I can't do a deadlift even though I need to be deadlifting more. I can't do a power clean, and I can't do a bicep curl because it's your push day. And that's the problem. Whereas with full body, it doesn't put you into that mindset, and it leaves you into the mindset of you're in there to train. You're in there to train everything, but that doesn't mean you can't specialize and work on your weak points more in that setup. And he at least hinted to that and pushed towards that at the end, so I will give props for that. So overall, I agreed with the video. I thought it was pretty good, and as far as people who were trying to say he was taking a knock at me, I literally don't see anything he said in that video that really was knocking anything that I say or that my particular philosophy, unless someone has misunderstood what it is that I teach and believe. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.